Hi. So I decided to record a video of myself presenting this because although it wasn't stated as a requirement exactly, I think it just makes sense for this kind of thing. If I'm going to make a presentation, I might as well actually present it. So I decided to work on my Overwatch data set that I talked about in one of my previous essays, actually. So I'm looking at, for the game Overwatch, the effect of maps on win rate. That's what we're looking at today. So what is Overwatch and why should you care? So if you've never heard of it, Overwatch is a fast-paced multiplayer shooter with around 189,000 concurrent players as of today's date. Overwatch also has the Overwatch League, which is a big professional esport organization, which is the main thing that really gives it validity in my eyes, because there are people who actually make money, like real money, out of this game. And I think there could be some market for data analysts for like one of these many professional teams. And that's why I find this data set interesting. And even if you didn't think like, Overwatch has fallen in popularity quite a bit, and it is still a video game. But I think for the purposes of this project, if nothing else, it's a good learning experience. And the data set I use still ended up being interesting and useful, I believe. So just a quick brief explanation of how Overwatch games work, because that's what we're focusing on. Okay, you can break them down into 3 simple steps. There's 2 teams of players, and they're placed on some given map. There's like 20 different maps, and each map has some objective. It's just going to be this small area, something like this, and they have to control it. The 2 teams fight for control. Whichever team controls it wins. So just a quick brief history of Overwatch statistics. The in-game client does have a lot of statistics you can look at. This is a screenshot from me playing the game, and they have stuff like time played, games won, lost, all kinds of stuff you don't really need to worry about for this. And there's also a website called Overbuff, which kind of takes these statistics and then puts them in a more of a readable format and categorizes them a bit. But one thing that is distinctly lacking from both of these sources is that there's almost no data on stuff to do with maps. There's no information on map win rates or which characters you play most on some maps or game modes or anything like that. But the main thing is of all the different types of maps, there's almost no statistics out there for people to get to, and there's no studies or anything like that. So I noticed there was a gap there. So what I decided to do was to keep track of my own games, keeping track of these variables. So whether or not I won, lost, or draws ended up being very negligible. I pretty much just ignored them for this because I had like 1 or 2, mostly win or losses. Obviously the map, the game mode, and how much I won or lost by. And I currently have about 143 observations. So my question is simple. Does the map I play on have a significant impact on whether or not I will win? So the reasoning here is maps vary quite a lot in Overwatch. Some can be wide open like this one with long sight lines. Sniper rifles would be very good here. Any kind of long range weapon would be quite strong. But then maybe you have some maps that have a lot more cover. So maybe some shotguns will perform better. And I myself, I don't like using snipers. I'm very bad at them. So I think there is a possibility of there being some significant differences between maps such as these. So first steps, I got to import the data and do some cleaning. I check to make sure there's no missing values. In this case, it's not the biggest data set and I made it, so there's no missing values, but I still checked. And I decided to one hot encode win, loss, draw, just because it's good practice. Really, my first major visualization was just a bar plot to see how much I win versus lose my games overall. This is looking at all the games. And the result is around 48% win percentage, which the way Overwatch works is it will place you in games with people of equal skill, roughly. So a 50% win percentage is what you'd expect. 48% is pretty close. Given the sample size, I'm not too surprised. My code for this, by the way, will be in the speaker notes. So if I'll send you the presentation. And if you just scroll down underneath this in the notes, you'll see all the code I did to do this. And below any slide that would need code, there will be code beneath it. So some early analysis I did, I just kind of just made an array of all the different maps that there could be. 19 maps are currently in the competitive rotation, so that's what we have. And I just kind of looped through them and calculated the win rates for each of them. I'm not going to show you the whole list. It's not particularly interesting just to look at win rates. I was just doing it to get an idea of where we were at, and it's not super surprising. A lot of them are close to 50%. Some of them are a little under or over. You'll see later on. So what I decided to do is do a chi-square test. Chi-square tests are really good for categorical variables, and I've got 2 of them that I'm comparing. And I just really wanted to get a good general idea of if there's anything to work with my data, or if it really is like there's nothing here. So null hypothesis is that my likelihood to win is completely independent of the map, doesn't matter at all. Alternate hypothesis, well, maybe my likelihood to win is dependent on the map. And so I just ran the chi-square test, code will be below, and we end up getting a p-value of 0.79, which is not significant at all. We're testing at a 0.05 significance level. And so this is where I came to realize there are some problems with this test. So first of all, 143 observations sounds like a lot, but when you spread it out among 19 maps, that's an average of 7.5 or basically 7 games per map, which isn't huge. It's still enough though that the expected values are high enough to meet the requirements for a chi-square test. Like the test is valid, but I would have liked more observations. And as far as random sampling goes, I played all the games, but the maps are chosen randomly by the game itself. But I think the real issue that I had with this first test is that it's just comparing all the maps together. But what's happening is, you see in the next slide, what spurred me to start this entire project is I believed I performed much worse or much better on a few select maps, not necessarily all of them. I really think some of the maps, I think it's like pretty even. Like it could go either way, but there are some that I think I win a lot and some that I think I lose a lot on. And so I made a new data set with only those maps that I cared about. And I actually renamed them as either, like each map is either named good or bad based off of whether I think I would win or lose. Not based off of actually looking at the direct win rates, because at that point, it's almost like I'm skewing the test to work. I'm just doing it what I personally think, because the purpose of this entire thing is to see if my assumptions were correct at the start. If some maps I really do perform better on. So we made a contingency table, and this is just showing you I got these 2 columns, bad and good. You can see wins, losses is 0, win is 1. We'll have a better visualization for this later on. I'm just showing you what the contingency table ended up looking like. But then we run the second chi-square test, okay, using that table. So null again is that likelihood to win is independent of the map, but this time the maps are just good or bad. We kind of reduce it down. And alternate, my likelihood to win is dependent on the map. And we actually just barely reject the null with a 0.0447. So that's pretty good. So this means when we're looking at the 12 maps that I singled out, 6 good, 6 bad, the result is that it is significant. So what does this mean exactly? Well, first of all, you can see it visually. I make some visualizations like you wanted. So we've got on the winning maps, wins and losses. You can see we win more than we lose. Not by a huge amount, but then on the losing maps, I lose a lot compared to winning. So this is what we wanted to see. This makes sense. And it also reflects why we would have rejected over here. So some concluding thoughts. Well, I think there is definitely some kind of relationship between some maps and whether or not I would win or lose. I don't think it proves any kind of causation yet. Overwatch is a complex game. There's game mode, there's character choice, there's overall improvement over time. There's a lot of things I'm kind of disregarding here, but the relationship is still interesting. And I think I would continue with further testing. For example, this chi-square test, even the one where I singled it out to good and bad maps, it's kind of like essentially doing like a 2-tailed z-test for proportions. That's basically what I'm doing with this chi-squared. And that's not exactly ideal, because it's just testing for independence. But I already know what I'm looking for, which is I want to see this. I want to see that I win more on the winning maps than I win on the losing maps, right? So I could do a 2 proportion z-test, one-tailed, to see if the proportion of me winning is higher on these maps than on here, significantly, of course. Obviously, you can see it is higher, but is it significant? That's the question. So I could do a 2 proportion z-test, and just basically it would probably reject with an even smaller p-value. That would be the goal. And then, of course, I could consider the other variables I haven't looked at, see how they relate. There's probably some kind of regression I could do. But for this project, I stuck with the chi-squared because honestly, that took a lot of time to do. And yeah, then we have some references. There wasn't really a whole lot to reference here. I just referenced, I went to the Overwatch League main website just to consult that, and just my own Overwatch profile on Overbuff, just for that screenshot way back over here. But that's my presentation. Just gonna end it off there.